Welcome to another episode of the Star Local Media High School Sports Podcast. I'm Matt Welch, being joined by Bryan Murphy and Devin Hasson. And gentlemen, we are live from Kelly's Craft Tavern in Frisco. Yes, our first ever remote episode of the Star Local Media High School Sports Podcast. Yes, we are broadcasting on this Thursday afternoon from Kelly's Craft Tavern here in Frisco. Folks, if you have not been here, come on out and try one of the many craft beers at their full-service bar and enjoy some made-from-scratch food. Kelly's is located at Preston Ridge on the west side of Preston, just north of 121. And again, big thanks to them for having us out here to record this episode. And what has been, I don't know, guys, where would you say this week ranks as far as just the busiest weeks on the high school sports calendar for us?
It's got to be the busiest.
Wait, when you factor in, I mean, signing day is always big, but when you factor in realignment every 2 years, in addition to basketball going through their stretch run, in addition to district soccer getting into their full swing, in addition to softball starting up,
regional swimming.
Yeah, wrestling is kicking up with regionals. There's just
I'm just getting dizzy listening to you list off all those things, man. Yes, it is one of the busiest weeks of the high school sports calendar, and obviously for folks who are apprised of what goes on this week, Monday was a huge day, one of the cornerstone days on the high school sports calendar. It was the UIL's biennial realignment, a day that is so important that it only happens once every 2 years.
Thankfully.
So to account for obviously high school enrollments, they fluctuate, they go up and down and whatnot. So to account for that, every 2 years, the UIL realigns the athletic districts. And long story short, it basically it kind of sets the wheels in motion for these next 2 school years. Everything from the teams that your favorite high school is going to need to go against in order to make the playoffs, right up to the teams they're going to have to go against in the postseason and whatnot. For us, I mean, it kind of lays the groundwork for what we're going to be covering and all that. It is a huge day, and there's always so much suspense leading up to realignment because nobody truly knows where they're going to wind up, which teams they're going to be paired with. And but now the dust has settled. We know the new athletic districts, and whereas you had some parts of our coverage area that didn't have a ton of shakeup, you had some though where things were just turned upside down. So we've had some time to let it all settle. So now let's react, guys. Let's get it all out there. Let's talk about just what is ahead for the various high schools that we cover, as they now know what their future is following the UIL's biennial realignment. We're going to start over in Class 6A. Later on in the podcast, we're going to bring on Prosper ISD Athletic Director Valerie Little for some reaction to Prosper's happenings over at realignment and just some other notes from around the area and whatnot. So let's start over in 6A. And speaking of Prosper, they are involved in one of the districts that incurred one of the biggest shakeups of any high school in the area, and that was after 20 plus years. They finally did it, folks. They finally broke up Allen-Plano ISD. I was out at signing day yesterday, and, I mean, it still hasn't even settled in for a lot of those folks. I mean, both communities are still pretty rocked by this news just because no one ever thought it would end. I mean, it's the last time that Plano ISD and Allen were not in the same district, you'd have to go all the way back to 1997.
Well, and it's not just a proximity thing. It's an enrollment thing.
Oh, yeah.
And just in that how much bigger they are than so many of the other schools in this area, I didn't think they would be separated anytime I could foresee it. So
you ask yourself, okay, so over the last 20 years, how many schools just across the entire state had been in the same district over that span, despite not being in the same city or being as part of the same ISD? I mean, I can't imagine that list is long. It just felt like, okay, I mean, it feels like that's where like the UIL prognosticators would start when they're plotting out realignment. Okay, we're going to put Allen and Plano ISD in the same district. Okay, what's next? Just get it out of the way. But nope, it is yes, they have gone their separate ways. Allen is in District 5, 6A with Denton Braswell, Denton Geyer at Little Elm, the 2 McKinney ISD schools, McKinney High and McKinney Boyd, and Prosper. That is 5, 6A. Right next to them is 6, 6A, where Plano ISD remains. They will be with Lewisville ISD and Coppell. So, what is, I don't know, Bryan, on the Prosper side of things, just what was your reaction to seeing this district, whether it's Prosper, whether it's Little Elm, because obviously you've got a couple 6A schools now in the mix. What do you make of just this district that kind of came out of nowhere?
The 5, 6A District of Doom for Little Elm? Is that what you're referring to? We're paired in there with Allen and Denton Geyer. It's like, hey, you're joining 6A unexpectedly. At least I didn't expect it when they made up the numbers last month. But yeah, let's just throw you in with the 2 biggest powerhouses outside of Duncanville right now, and Prosper, who just went 4 rounds deep in the playoffs. But it's not going to be easy for Little Elm. We knew either way, most likely they were going to be thrown in there with Lewisville ISD or the Planos and Allen and McKinney and Prosper. We thought they would be kind of what Jesuit was the last 2 years. Either way, it was going to be a tough draw. I think this was – if you're looking at the strength of the top of this district with Guyer, Allen, and Prosper is overwhelming. I'd almost prefer that, though, over being in there with Lewisville ISD, because I think from top to bottom, you have Coppell, Flower Mound, Lewisville, Marcus, all of the Planos, Hebron. That's a tough district. You're going to have the last place team in a lot of sports.
It's so
well be a playoff
rounded.
team in so many districts. At least Little Elm, I think they can go in there and compete in most sports with a McKinney and a McKinney Boyd, and they're kind of even with Braswell in a lot of sports. Are they going to struggle against Guyer and Allen and Prosper? Yes, of course.
But so is just about everybody else in the district.
But it's still tough. I was kind of hoping. I know we talked about where they could land if to be able to compete in 6A right off the bat. If they got maybe thrown in there with like Irving ISD or Richardson ISD. I was kind of
some wishful thinking there, brother.
I mean, the UIL's done some crazy things, so why not make them travel an hour to go play Berkner or Irving MacArthur? But they got the tough end of the draw, and they're gonna find out pretty quick, what 6A sports is all about.
Yeah, I think the fact that those 15 schools wound up, basically split between two districts, that's not a surprise, because one of the things that the UIL does take into account for realignment is proximity, and especially with Braswell and Little Elm making that jump up. Those were two schools that obviously were not in 6A beforehand, so that does kind of tip the scales a bit as far as perhaps reshuffling the deck. It's just a question of kind of where the UIL then drew the line as far as separating those clusters of high schools, and apparently it was the 5 miles or whatnot that separated Allen and Plano ISD. It is wild because you look at so many folks have those are just so many rivalries that have just been carved out over the last 2 decades that you're just now having to they're just put on hold. And obviously they can play each other in non-district action and other sports and whatnot, but as far as just seeing them 2 times a year and just knowing what those matchups mean to the communities, it's even something something right down to tennis. I was talking with the Allen tennis coach, and they've been chasing Plano West for so long, and they've been right on their tail and whatnot. So just to have that now gone away is it's kind of a bummer, because you've been so close, you've been fighting to get over that hurdle for so long, and now it's kind of out of your hands, and you have to maybe cross your fingers that you see them in the playoffs. But both communities were very much shocked by that. One of the other big subplots from the Plano ISD side of things, if you just look on the kind of the social media reaction, was just what a sigh of relief for Plano ISD. They're not in the same district as Allen anymore, and oh boy, they're supposed to be doing cartwheels over at Plano ISD. I'm not so sure, because obviously yes, Allen's strength against Plano ISD on the football field especially is well documented. They've Plano ISD has not won a football game against Allen since 2005. So whereas you're out, you don't have to worry about Allen, at least for this coming season. There's kind of two sides to this. So on the one hand, you can look at it from the standpoint that if you look at District 9 6A this year, if you're Plano ISD, you could think, okay, well, the four playoff teams from that district, they're not our district next year. Allen, Prosper, McKinney, they're off in 5 6A. Jesuit got bumped down to District 7 6A. So in theory, that should clear the deck a little bit for Plano ISD. But you're getting these Lewisville ISD schools in, which the last time that they it's been a few years since Plano ISD and Lewisville ISD shared a district, and things have changed quite a bit since then. I believe of those 4 Lewisville ISD schools, 3 of them have new head coaches now, and some of those programs are in a little bit better shape than folks in Plano might recall. I was just going back through just over the years, looking at just the track record of success with Lewisville ISD and Coppell for that matter and whatnot. So over the past 14 years, 11 times has Lewisville ISD put at least 2 football teams in the playoffs. That's consistency right there. And then that's not even to dismiss a program like Coppell, which had made the playoffs 10 of the past 12 years. So and you factor that in with just Plano ISD's just their success against Lewisville ISD over the years since 2010. It's been pretty up and down. A combined record of 35 and 34 against Lewisville ISD for Plano ISD in football. So the idea that this just all of a sudden clears the deck for all 3 Plano schools to get back into the mix and just a sigh of relief. I think it's at least you look at it in this sense. Okay, there's not a matchup there that's just an absolute walking death march like it was any time you played Allen, where you just kind of went in there almost, I don't want to say accepting defeat, but you kind of knew what you were up against because of what that program has stood for. It at least, kind of evens the keel as far as just the level of competitiveness goes, gives you more of a fighting chance, but by no means would I just automatically pencil in, 1-2 Plano ISD schools into the playoffs.
That's kind of the point I was making with Little Elm. Yeah, you have those two games that are, most likely losses, bad losses. But if you're Plano ISD, man, you got to gear up for every single one of those games. Like you're literally both Flower Mounds, Lewisville, Coppell, like those are not going to be cakewalks, and it's going to be tough for Plano ISD.
I mean, Marcus is coming off its best season in years. They went 3 rounds deep. They've got the, what I would assume right now is the front runner for the district MVP and quarterback Garrett Nussmeyer. He's going to be back as a senior. They've got plenty of experience elsewhere. Lewisville has just about its entire offense back. They have turned a massive corner under head coach Michael Odell. They've got Taylon Green, Damian Martinez, maybe the best 1-2 punch at wide receiver in the district, and Isaiah Stevens and Armani Winfield. I mean, there is a ton of talent there that Plano ISD did not have to worry about last time they shared a district with Lewisville ISD.
And isn't East still playing Allen in non-district?
They are, yeah, and that was kind of the scramble effect after you realize that, okay, we're going to be apart now, and all of a sudden Allen's got to fill half its non-district schedule, and they did eventually settle on a Week 1 matchup with Plano East as part of the Tom Landry Classic. So that rivalry is not entirely going away, but yeah, it's very much different landscape now for Allen and Plano ISD. As for the first time since the mid-'90s, they will be in separate school districts. Let's see. And if you're just looking at this kind of from the Lewisville ISD and Coppell standpoint, I mean, they're in a district now where, I mean, listen, okay, with the exception of like maybe your basketballs and maybe like occasional soccer, in 6-6A, in the current alignment in 6-6A, it's basically been 5 teams competing for 4 playoff spots. With all due respect to the Irving ISD schools, like I said, there's some where they offer a bit more resistance. MacArthur's making a big push in basketball right now, and then they've got a little something in soccer. But otherwise, I mean, the football teams would routinely lose by 5-6 touchdowns. It was a very, very kind of haves and have-nots district outlook. So for them, I mean, I think it's better. And again, that's, I mean, 3 of your 7 district games for these last couple of years have essentially been blowouts. So, it's nice to at least have, a bit more of a balanced look and something to keep your kids a bit more honest, to where you're not, having to kind of go through maybe, a 2-3 week stretch where you're having to, you can just kind of go, 50, 75% and still come away with a convincing win. Because with all due respect, I mean, yeah, Plano's still going to offer plenty of resistance of its own, but a much more balanced look for Lewisville ISD and Coppell as they get ready for a brand new look to District 6-6A. Devin, whereas obviously there was all sorts of just chaos and calamity in our coverage areas for 6A. Things just kind of held serve over there in Garland ISD.
For the most part, you look at the current 10-6A and 11-6A. The 7 Garland ISD teams with Naaman Forest and South Garland opting up, we're going to stay together. Wiley was the outlier the last 2 years, but, geographically it makes sense. Wiley borders Saxe. They're right there. They're all comparable size. So maintaining that 18 district was the most, I thought that was the obvious choice. And I heard, you always hear crazy rumors around this time about we're going to ship Wiley off. We're going to move the 2 Rockwall schools over and make a 19 district. But then when you look over at 11-6A, that didn't make much sense either because,
it did not.
I mean, because the 3 Mesquite ISD schools and the East Texas schools have always been grouped. Well, with Longview dropping down, that left Tyler Lee out there on an island. So you just assume that 4 would be together as they have since basically, with the exception of 2 years since 2004. Again, the Rockwall schools are right there. They've been part of this mix for a long time. So then you had 6. Then you kind of look at those, I kind of call them floating schools, the one school, like your Wileys. That's why there was some consideration they might move Wiley over. But what they did was they moved Skyline, and they added Skyline to the current 11-6A. And, Skyline is 5 miles from Mesquite. They're the lone Dallas ISD team. It made everything they did in terms of putting those districts together made sense to me. And that's kind of, talking to GISD and MISD officials, there was no surprises on that end. One thing to note, though, was with the aforementioned Allen-Plano district going back to Region 1.
Yes, I wanted to touch on that,
that
too.
Garland ISD goes from 10-6A to 9-6A. Mesquite goes from 11 to 10. So that means they match up in the first round of the playoffs.
Which is great news for you, man.
Great news for me. And those school districts really liked it because, again, the Garland ISD schools in that first round were running up against the Allens and the Planos and the McKinneys and the Prospers, all of which are considerably bigger in size and enrollment than the Garland schools. And, it didn't apply in every sport, but that's a tough chore to handle. If you say that enrollment difference doesn't make a difference, then you're crazy. I don't care how much you want to downplay it if you're one of those big dogs, but it does make a difference. Same thing on the Mesquite ISD end. They had been matched up with that Central Texas district with Killeen, Temple, Waco Midway. It's not a terrible drive to maybe have to go to Fairfield or to find a halfway point, even going all the way to Waco if you're playing a Temple. But, for a by-district round matchup, you don't expect to have that travel, especially when they were already making trips to Tyler and Longview for every sport. So, it makes sense. I think that's the way it was for several years back in the day with Garland ISD and Mesquite ISD. But looking ahead to that area round, because the other with that, some of those teams joining Region 1, they decided to move a few teams over from Region 1 to fill that gap. And in 11-6A, you have, and especially since we're talking football and basketball right now, I've heard District of Doom applied to several different districts in all classifications. But when you put DeSoto, Duncanville, and Cedar Hill in the same district, and that's not to even count some of the other powerhouses, that just are kind of getting overshadowed right there. So while they may get what they want in that first round in terms of being closer and being more evenly matched, that area round is going to be a doozy for any of those football and basketball teams going forward.
I like to, just because it does kind of level the playing field in the regions quite a bit. So you're just not just overloading Region 1 as you have been in the past, and whatnot. And it does, if you're going to exchange the the Planos and the Allens and in place of the DeSotos, Duncanvilles, and the Mansfield schools, it's it's nice to at least have them in separate regions so as to kind of keep the strength on a relatively even keel there.
Yeah.
All right, guys, before we bring on Prosper ISD Athletic Director Valerie Little, we just wanted to once again note that this is the first ever remote episode of the Star Local Media High School Sports Podcast, and a big thanks to the folks at Kelly's Craft Tavern here in Frisco for hosting us, guys. How about this place? I got to tell you, as I walked in here, I don't know if you guys got to look at the food coming out of the kitchen, but it does look amazing, and I cannot wait to finish up here and maybe go and try some of those half dozen different burgers and whatnot. maybe some ribs. You guys know what a big cheeseburger fan I am. And
you are. The chicken tenders are really good. I've been to the Kelly's in Allen, and I believe last time, it was about a year and a half ago, I think I got queso on the mashed potatoes.
You can do that to mashed potatoes?
Well, one in Allen you can.
And right now it's just a big tease because I've never been here before, but I can see everybody milling around, and we're close enough where we can smell everything coming out.
And does it smell delicious, folks? Yes. Come out to Kelly's, located at Preston Ridge on the west side of Preston, just north of 121. And now, let's get back to the podcast. And we are back, and we have been joined by some Prosper ISD Athletics royalty over here. Prosper ISD Athletics Director Valerie Little. Valerie, thank you for taking the time out of your busy day to join the Star Local Media High School Sports Podcast. Absolutely. I know this is one of the busiest weeks of the year for y'all.
Yes, sir, it is.
So we very much appreciate it. Obviously, a lot of this episode is devoted to talking about realignment,
yes,
which obviously y'all were front and center on Monday as you learn your new athletic district for these next 2 school years. The dust has settled. You've had a little bit of time to compose yourself. So, what was it? What do you think about the draw for Prosper?
So the draw for Prosper, we were excited about both of them. But for Prosper, that district across the board, all sports from top to bottom, it is a little bit stronger than what we had. And while we thought that 7-6A was an amazing district, when we got that lineup, we were not. I would not say shocked because there's nothing on there that shocks us or makes us nervous. But it's just the fact that we're going right back into just that much talent. We're ready for it, but it's one of those we got to get to work today, right? We started on Tuesday, back to work. So we just know that it's going to be a battle every single week. Be very competitive across the board in all sports.
Over the summer, I remember we talked about y'all's riverry with Allen.
Yes.
You kind of wanted to be the big dogs right there with Allen.
We did.
Y'all have been.
Yes, sir.
In most sports. Were you glad to see you guys still paired with Allen?
Oh, absolutely, because we're not done with them, right? We need another chance at them. Yeah. And not that we will ever be done with them, but we really do think that we can compete with them. People will hold them up on a pedestal, which is okay, but we do think that we are competitive with them in every sport. And even some of our sports, we have proven that.
Now you're in a district with two schools in Little Elm and Braswell that are making the jump to Class 6A for the first time, which 2 years ago was a scenario that y'all were preparing for. Sure. So kind of take me back to, I guess, 2 years ago, prior to that last realignment cycle, when you were getting ready for your first district as a 6A school. Just what were the feelings like around campus, and how did y'all feel about making that transition initially?
We're pretty confident around there, and I think we are confident because we have good people and good kids. Our kids have great parents, right, who have a lot of resources and will help them get the most out of their talent. So we were never really scared about that. Obviously, there was some apprehension going from 5A to the district in 6A, which is the way we saw it. But I think when we were able to start, Matt, and we have been very competitive the past 2 years in that district, I think that gave us all quite a bit of confidence. Our sub-varsity teams also got to compete against them, which means they gained confidence each week because they were getting to play the same teams that they would at the varsity level. So,
would you have envisioned, a year and a half into, being a 6A program, that this school would have this level of success to where it does look like, you made the playoffs in every sport last year,
right.
and was the vibe just a surprise, or just what do you make of these first year and a half?
So I think probably at first it was a little bit of surprise, but then you kind of settle into, okay, we can do this. We know in the back of our mind we can, but when you step out onto that court, the field, whichever kind of field you're playing on, there is still a little bit of apprehension because they are the big dogs, right? And when you haven't been in that venue yet, and then all of a sudden you step into it, there is a little bit of apprehension. But now I think we gain confidence with each year that we play them, each sport that we play them, and we can compete with them. Our whole town, our whole district, our whole school, everybody gains confidence.
And then obviously, in the meantime, y'all had a nice little milestone occasion with the opening of the new football stadium, Children's Health Stadium. Just talk about that milestone occasion for the school district and what it was like to have a venue like that now.
Well, that's amazing considering where we came from. Our last stadium barely would hold 3,500 people.
I remember it all too well.
I covered a game when y'all were in 5A still with Little Elm. Okay. I was telling the guys, back in the day, I had to watch that game. I had to cover that game on the visiting stands outside.
With that little overhang?
Yes.
Like it's about 2 to 3 inches maybe?
Yeah. Luckily it was like 70 degrees that night. It was like early October, so there was no problems there. But I'm definitely glad y'all
it has definitely been an upgrade. And not just that, right, having facilities for all of our reporters who will come and report on us, just having the facilities for our kids, right? Our kids deserve those type of facilities. And that was pretty overwhelming to watch them walk into that field for the first time. I will say this, we knew that our crowd was going to come out. We had no idea we would sell out as many games as we did.
Okay.
We probably had 2 or 3 games where we did not even sell a ticket on game day because we were sold out by the time we got to game day. And that's 7,500, 8,000 tickets. We say that our home side holds 6,000, but we also sell standing room only. So we had between 7,000 and 8,000 fans coming to almost every single Prosper game, and that was an unbelievable show of support.
Well, I bet you expect the same next year after going 4 rounds deep.
Absolutely, we do. It only takes once, right? And then we gain a little confidence. We get a little cocky about it. We're like, now we know everyone's coming. Though we had a live eagle at the first game, and people keep asking me if we're doing that again. That was a one-time thing. We're not going through that again.
Yeah, what went into that?
It really wasn't that bad, except that they needed a lot of time to do training and stuff during the week. So I believe they got here on Tuesday of that week, and they did 2 to 3 different trainings. They would come out to the stadium, train with the eagle, and that was really neat to see because no one was there. It was just you and that team, and so that was neat to get to know them and go through that process with them.
Is that why Prosper Rock Hill is the Blue Hawks? Do y'all want to stick with the bird theme, or is that like total coincidence?
It's not a coincidence. We would like to. What you don't want to do though is run out of birds. One of the mascots that our kids will get to vote on for the new middle school opening next year rushing is a raptor. So we would like to stay with the theme. However, if it gets to the point and they vote on the rattlers, right, the rushing rattlers, we're going to let our kids decide on that. So yes, Brian, there is that idea that we want a theme, but when it comes down to it, we're not going to force it if they want something different.
Speaking of which, you mentioned Rock Hill, as they're about to embark on their first year in varsity athletics. So it's a school that's starting from scratch. It's going to be no seniors, just freshmen, sophomores, and et cetera. So what kind of expectations, should folks have for Rock Hill in this first year in varsity athletics?
So they actually will have seniors.
Okay.
They will be 9 through 12 when we open. And I think a lot of people have been shocked by that. But our enrollment got so incredibly high at Prosper High School. Yes. They are at complete capacity. There is no way that we can fit anyone else in that school building. So we had to go 9 through 12. So we'll have about 1,800 kids there. Our juniors and seniors had the chance to choose. So before we had to turn in our enrollment numbers for alignment, they had a chance to choose. I think they had about a 2-week period where they could choose if they were going to go to Rock Hill or stay.
So there's a good amount of kids that were juniors this year that are juniors at Prosper this year that will be seniors at Rock Hill?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So they will have a first graduating class, and I think that is what helped some of those kids make that decision. Is, hey, we could be the first graduating class from Rock Hill. No one else will ever be able to say that.
Now, Bryan was telling memories of when he covered Prosper back in the day, and I've been at the paper since 2009, and I think back to the very first time that I covered y'all, and you were a Class 3A school all the way back then, and it is still wild to think in what's been a relatively short time how far Prosper has come. I mean, when you think back to just the strides that this the city, the community, the athletics program have taken. I mean, how proud is Prosper of just the job that they've done elevating just their stature as an athletics program?
Very proud, and that's all a credit to our kids, and it's what I said earlier, in their parents and the amount of resources they will put into it, and then we bring in great coaches, right? As long as you make sure you have great leadership there, we're going to be okay. But I was actually telling Chris from Kelly's earlier, we've grown probably almost 300 kids in the last month since school has started this semester.
Wow.
So people are coming there at such a rapid pace that we're not even able to keep up with it.
Well, and along those same lines, I work in Dallas County, so all we hear about this area is the growth, whether it be the Frisco, Prosper, et cetera. You opening the second high school now, competing at the varsity sports next year. What's the projected growth? I mean, are we looking at a third high school coming up soon?
2023 will open high school 3.
Okay.
But that one, now it is obviously still early in the plannings, but we are projecting that to be more of a 9-10 campus and let us roll into it. We hope that we will be able to do that with the growth. We will eventually get between 6 and 8 high schools because that is just how much growth we will have there in Prosper.
So y'all are going to be Frisco, like how Frisco is now, pretty much.
We
eventually.
Will. Yes, sir.
Interesting.
Yeah. Now they're up to, I believe, 11 right now.
10. 11 is going to open.
It's easy to lose count.
Yes, it is. We will not get that big. 6 to 8 is the most I've been hearing. Now we all know that demographers can be off a little bit, but if they're that off, we might all be in trouble.
We'll give you one more question before we let you go. You mentioned the leadership within Prosper ISD, and one of your colleagues, Assistant Athletic Director Jeff Smith, got some big news earlier this week as he was promoted and named the new athletic director over at Plano ISD. Just talk about that move for Coach Smith, getting that opportunity.
Absolutely. So Coach Smith started his career in Plano. I do not remember how many years he spent there, but he's always had a love for Plano. That's just something that when someone gives you your first chance, you always have a little bit of a loyalty to them. And so he's always loved Plano. Him and his wife both worked there. They still have a lot of friends there. And he is the best man to lead that district right now. There's a lot of people that say they need all this change. And what you really need is someone who's been there, not from the beginning of Plano, but who was there a while ago. And they understand the tradition and stuff that's at Plano ISD. And I think he is the perfect person to step into that role and take that district over.
Awesome, Coach. Hey, well, we appreciate it very much. Thank you to, again, Prosper Athletics Director Valerie Little for swinging by Kelly's Craft Tavern out here in Frisco to tag along for this episode of the Star Local Media High School Sports Podcast. Coach, best of luck to you and Prosper the rest of the school year.
Thank you so much.
We are here with Chris Carey from Kelly's Craft Tavern. Chris, tell us about this fine establishment you've got here.
Well, we are a craft-made or scratch-made food place. We serve burgers, barbecue, salads, lots of Texas and Southern comfort food. We specialize in craft alcohol as well. We serve beer. We have 52 beers on tap, most of which are rotating.
Okay.
And then we have a lot of specialized craft bourbons, scotches, whatever you're looking for. We will probably have something at the higher end and in the middle end. Not too many on the lower end, but all fairly and reasonably priced.
Awesome, Chris. Hey, thank you for taking the time to chat with us, and obviously thank you to Kelly's Craft Tavern for hosting this episode of the Star Local Media High School Sports Podcast.
It's a pleasure to have y'all. Thank you.
All right, big thanks to Valerie Little for taking the time to swing by and chat with the Star Local Media High School Sports Podcast. Let's keep our realignment reaction going, guys, and let's talk a little bit of 5A. Devin, we just talked about one District of Doom over at the Class 6A level. So I want your initial reaction to the 5A Division I equivalent of that District of Doom. There were some rumblings that it very well could happen, and sure enough, District 7 5A Division I has somebody with a very, very wicked sense of humor at the UIL headquarters has paired right. Highland Park with Longview, John Tyler, McKinney North, Sherman, Wiley East, and, of course, your West Mesquite Wranglers. So, Devin, what was the reaction upon seeing this just horrid creation of a district?
It could have been even worse. There was rumblings at Lancaster at the end of that mix as well. Talking to Cody Groves, the Mesquite ISD athletic director, he thought they could have gone two different ways.
Okay.
They already had the core five with West Mesquite, McKinney North, Sherman, John Tyler, and Wiley East.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to break that up or keep that? He thought it might just be really simple because they lost Texas High and they lost Poteet, dropping down to Division I. So he says, why not? We know we're going to get Longview because Longview's always been associated with Mesquite ISD.
For sure.
And then maybe just plug Lancaster in there, and you have a 17 district.
Just plug them in.
Yeah. Just,
throw them right in there.
But, there was also thought, depending on what the UIL decided to do with some of those, teams that were a little bit further north, like Sherman, like McKinney North, that they might trend south, and they might put, Longview and John Tyler and West Mesquite, and maybe group them in with Red Oak, Midlothian, Lancaster, that group in South Dallas. They decided not to do that. They basically did trade 2 for 2 in keeping that core 5 from the current 7-5A Division I intact. Because Groves, he said he was a little surprised about Highland Park. I guess he had seen some forecasts where they were going to be placed in other districts. For me personally, I actually had Highland Park in that group, along with Lancaster, for that matter, depending on what they were going to decide to do with some of those other South Dallas schools. But if you go back to 1990, Highland Park has been in the same district as West Mesquite 16 years, got to 30 years. And 2 of those years, and they were up. That was the 2 years, the anomaly, when they got bumped up to 6A, and they were with the Mesquite ISD schools there. So Highland Park is no stranger to being affiliated with Mesquite ISD. But, in terms of being top heavy, when you have Longview, who's just 2 years removed from a state title, and Highland Park, who obviously was coming off 3 in a row. That's a big 1-2 punch coming out of that district.
It's a shame that looks like we're just a year late with McKinney North. I would have loved to see this McKinney North offense from this past year, just to try to swing in that district with Dylan Markowitz and Manny Fincher and all those, just that record-setting offense of theirs. But that's just going to be a tough draw for everybody. It's but then you look elsewhere as far as districts that got some shake-up. Bryan over in Frisco. What is whether it was just the reaction you saw on social media or talking to coaches and whatnot, what is the vibe around Frisco ISD all of a sudden now with the state runner-ups coming to town and them sharing a district with Denton Ryan all of a sudden?
Well, I initially thought that was more of a district of doom than 7-5A, at least right even with them. Denton Ryan, Lone Star, the Colony, Frisco Independence. Frisco Independence went 3 rounds deep in the playoffs last year. Throwing another playoff team like Wakeland. Frisco Reedy is 2 years removed from a 14-1 season, and they should be improved from in a bounce back year. That's a tough district right there. Heritage should be better. But, Denton Ryan and Lone Star, it caused a lot of chaos with non-district. Seeing some of the coaches, after the draw was posted on the big screen at Realignment, Reedy had actually scheduled the Colony in a non-district game. They played them the last year. They played them the last 2 years in non-district. Reedy made the jump from Division II to Division I. And they still had them on the non-district, and Coach Chad Cole said, we knew there was a possibility that the Colony would still be in a district with us, but we kept them there anyways. Well, of course, they're in the same district. So then he's scrambling for, I believe it was a week 2, and he's talking to Plano, he's talking to this, and he's trying to figure out, weighing out his options, and it's a madhouse. And he decides with Liberty, who Frisco Liberty bumped down to Division II. Reedy and Liberty pretty much swapped spots, essentially. Yeah. And good for Liberty, by the way. Liberty, they had a down year the last couple years. Really tough go being in that district with the Behemoths and Frisco. So they should pick up some more wins next year. But, yeah. So Reedy's scrambling. He decides on Liberty. Lone Star needed a non-district game. Something with their non-district schedule messed up, being in a 9-team district. Yeah. And Rayburn was telling me, he was like, we were kind of anticipating a 9-team district, but kind of not. Because who would have expected Denton Ryan and Denton to be thrown in there with Frisco? I don't know. That's not what I would have expected. I wouldn't have been surprised if a McKinney North got thrown in there. I don't know. But... Of course, the evil guys at UIL were like, let's get Denton Ryan and Lone Star every year in district. But that game will definitely be circled on my calendar, and it should be a good one.
Where do you guys stand on what, I guess, the Lancaster district? If you guys had a chance to look over this.
Twitter was popping over this. I saw a bunch of people tweeting about this. So were they winners or losers? And we even talked about it, briefly on our reaction pod on Monday. Man, they're going from a district where they're having to battle it out with teams like Highland Park and whatnot, and how they're going to a district where Newman Smith is probably going to be the second best football team.
I went through and did win every game by 70 points.
I went through and did the math on this. So Lancaster last year won 11 games. The other 8 teams that are in District 6-5A Division I next season, they combined
hit us with it.
To win 13 games last season, including 2 teams I take it back, 3 teams, in R.L. Turner, Molina, and Sunset that went 0-10.
And I think the biggest question I have is that that's a 9-team district.
Yeah.
The 7 is a 17 district. I mean, they love 18 district traditionally. It would just make more sense, I guess, to put Lancaster in with that group where a lot of people thought they'd fall in the 7-5A.
But imagine that district with Longview, Highland Park, Lancaster, and even a McKinney North and Tyler, and then you have a district with the 2 Carrollton schools and then some of the worst teams in the state. No offense to Dallas ISD, but
it is what it is. You already have 6 Dallas ISD schools sitting right there. And I think I get when they decided to move Red Oak and Midlothian to Region 1, I think that just threw a kind of a loop in there, and they had to find a place for Lancaster. I'd love to know the rationale behind putting him with that group instead of the 7-5A. But as we'll talk about here in a minute, strange things happen with those Dallas ISD districts.
Because you wonder, if you're, and the fact that it's a 9-team district, I think only compounds matters because that means you only get 2 non-district games. So, you're essentially going to have to load up on those first 2 preseason games, and then after that, like you said, Devin, they're going to win every game by at least 7-8 touchdowns. And if you're Lancaster, how do you even gauge with that kind of schedule just how much better your team is actually getting week to week? It's really, really tough, and I don't know. I'm a believer in just a team needing just at least somebody in the district that can push, just so you can experience some form of adversity, just because it's going to come up at some point in the playoffs. And I think those folks at Lancaster would probably like to know sometime, and not even I don't even look at those games in September. You can only glean so much from them because again they're preseason games. Yeah. Teams are still trying to figure out what they have back then in early September. You're not getting if they were to play these games in late October or whatnot, when you're getting a much more finalized version of these teams. So it's. You can look at it one of 2 ways. Yeah, on the other hand, they're going to run the table in this district and look very, very dominant in doing so. But again, it remains to be seen just how much better they actually get from playing a schedule like that. And again, it's out of their hands, and no one can really kind of make heads or tails as to just why it wound up that way. Saw some fascinating theories being floated around as far as what to make of that district on social media. But yes, a very, very odd pairing there. And like you said, for Carrollton Farmers Branch ISD, Newman Smith and R.L. Turner, they took their lumps in that district with Denton Ryan and Grapevine Colleyville ISD and whatnot. So all of a sudden they might be looking hey, maybe we can weasel into the playoffs now.
Who is the second best team in that district? Is it Wilson? Is it Newman Smith?
Let's see.
Those things it's so cyclical. And these are teams or the Dallas ISD teams are out of our coverage area and not affiliated with our districts very often. Yeah. So it's kind of hard for me to comment anyway on who's coming back and what's who's kind of the favorite out of that grouping. But outside of Lancaster, I can tell you Lancaster's a favorite.
Way to go out on a limb there, Devin.
That's what I'm here.
Hot take. So let's talk about a couple teams now over at the 7-5A Division II level that had their fortunes altered quite significantly from last season. We had 2 that were dropping down in divisional play. Poteet out of Mesquite ISD and Creekview out of Carrollton Farmers Branch ISD. They're in separate districts, but let's talk about, Devin, let's talk about where the Pirates landed over in 6-5A Division II alongside a lot of other Dallas ISD schools. So you have Adamson, you got Conrad, Hillcrest, Thomas Jefferson, Kimball, Seagaville, South Oak Cliff, and Spruce. Where did this option land on kind of the radar as far as options for Poteet?
To Coach Groves, 100% surprise.
Wow.
Completely caught him off guard. That's, we just talked about the Lancaster thing, and not that Poteet has been on the level of Lancaster, but this is a Poteet team that has had a lot of success over the last decade with a couple of state semifinal appearances. And it just, you look at that, again, kind of like we just talked about with Division I, that was an 8-team all Dallas ISD district. They had 6 in the Division I, but this one was 8 teams. You would think they would give them their own district and let them go their way. From 2004 till 2017, Poteet's been in the same district as Forney and North Forney. The only reason they weren't these past years is because they went to split classifications. They're still in the same district with Forney and North Forney in every other sport. So, you have that. Royce City's nearby. Ennis and Corsicana are past district opponents. For Poteet, I guess that would make too much sense. Again, there's 7 teams in that other district, and Poteet would have made 8. It would have evened that out. Dr. Coach Grove, that was so out of left field. Obviously they try to go and cover all their bases and go through all the possible scenarios so that they're, at least somewhat prepared for it. That one totally out of left field, and like you say, that's a 9-team district, so they have the problem, of having only 2 non-district games. And now South Oak Cliff has had a good team here recently. They've been able to do some damage in the playoffs. In fact, Poteet played them, I believe, 3 years ago and beat them during one of their runs. But night in, night out, it's going to be tough. And then, as people have brought up when we talked about the Lancaster being in that district, if you're a one-trick, or even Wiley in the Garland ISD district, not that this makes a huge difference, but it sometimes can, is when they have district meetings and they vote on these issues, you basically don't have a vote. Because that those blocks are all going to block together. So, Wiley doesn't really have a vote in those 10-6A meetings because the Garland ISD schools are all going to vote together. Same thing, and again, I don't think it's going to be that big of a difference. I don't know if there's any issues that are coming to the forefront that are going to be that important. But, Poteet basically doesn't have a vote when it comes to those district meetings, and that's just kind of what you run into when you get thrown into these big multi-school districts.
Bryan, what do we make of the I guess a minor shuffling of the deck over in District 7-5A Division 2? You still have those Frisco ISD schools that did not make the cut for Division 1. You still got Denison, you still got Lake Dallas, still got Lovejoy, still got Princeton. We got a newcomer, though, in Prosper Rock Hill. And then we have Frisco Liberty making the drop down. So where do you feel like, did this district get stronger? Did it kind of level out? Is it maybe a little bit weaker? Where do you fall on this new district?
I wouldn't say it gets weaker. Because it's tough to say, with
it
a
does
team
lose
like
2 of the 4 playoff teams, including one that split the district title.
True. I don't want to necessarily say that, but it does level out quite a bit. Rock Hill, this is going to be a good chance for Lebanon Trail Memorial to maybe play, more even competition with the Rock Hill. They're in the same boat, within the last 2 years. Like I mentioned, Liberty, they've struggled really since JHI left. Really the last, 5-6 years or so. And now they're getting down there to play a new team like Rock Hill, a Princeton team that just recently made the move from 4A to 5A. It's Memorial, Liberty, Lebanon Trail, Rock Hill. They're all kind of grouped, kind of in that same category. Frisco, they should still be the big dogs now, especially with Reedy gone and whatnot, even though Frisco was the district champs. But just looking up top glance, it should be Frisco and Lovejoy's district, and with a sprinkle in of Denison, and the rest is all just complete even playing field. Yeah,
you wonder just kind of the trickle-down effect then, and just what kind of impact it'll have on programs like Denison and Lake Dallas, both of whom finished just outside the playoff picture last year. But like I said, with 2 of the 4 playoff teams from this district last season making the jump up to Division I, it now does perhaps kind of level things out and perhaps open up a gateway to those programs, whereas they might not have had enough to compete with the Braswells and the Reedies, that now there could be a theoretical pathway to the playoffs for a team like Lake Dallas, whereas last season they just got too overwhelmed by the top end of that district. I'm curious to see also the strides that like Memorial and Lebanon Trail take now in their 3rd years as varsity programs, and with Rock Hill at least having seniors being able to get some kids from Prosper with the success that Prosper's had over in 6A. Perhaps maybe they're a little bit further ahead of the curve.
Yeah, I was going to bring up that good point. There's a lot of talent in Prosper. They're very well coached. Mark Humble is going to lead that program, obviously.
About time Coach Humble gets a head coaching job.
He was OC at South Lake, and then OC at Lone Star.
So OC at Plano East.
Yep. So he's used to winning. He knows what it takes. He's seen a winning culture, and he's going to get a really good group of kids. And Valerie also told us that there's going to be some kids that are at Prosper now making the move to Rock Hill. So I don't know who. We don't know who and which players are going to come into play there, but you got to think they're getting some talent with all of the families and everyone moving into that area, Prosper, Celina, and North Frisco. don't be surprised if Rock Hill is not last place. Other teams like Lebanon Trail Memorial, they struggled mightily, but they also, in their first year didn't have seniors.
Yeah.
Don't be surprised if Rock Hill can pick up a win or two in this district.
One team that I very well could have seen working into this mix that was making the drop down to Division II was Carrollton Creekview, just given the proximity, and they've shared a district with a lot of those schools in the past. No, because that would have formed a 10-team district, and UIL just wasn't feeling that frisky. So instead, you get Carrollton Creekview all the way over in Region 1.
Sense.
And when you look at that district, they are such a geographical outlier relative to some of these other schools, as they are in it looks like a 7-team district, 7-8-team district with Fort Worth ISD and Grapevine. So yes, the 6 Fort Worth ISD schools of Northside, Polytechnic, South Hills, Southwest, Trimble Tech, and Wyatt. And then obviously Grapevine, which I didn't even realize Grapevine was that tiny all of a sudden. I always imagined Grapevine being one of the bigger schools in 5A. Nope, they're dropping down to 5A Division II. And then you got Carrollton Creekview, and that's just kind of, I guess, by default where you kind of had to put them. Which wasn't a again, if you weren't going to put them with those schools that we just mentioned, or again the Dallas ISD schools. Even any options closer than Fort Worth ISD, but that's just the way it fell for Carrollton Creekview. But nevertheless, though, it is. They were right in that mix with Newman, Smith, and R.L. Turner as far as schools that just every year you just knew that. There's a glass ceiling there in that district within 4 or 5A Division I with Denton Ryan and Grapevine, Birdville, Colleyville Heritage, all of whom went on to have really successful playoff runs. It was such a loaded district, and those CFB ISD schools were really just like, okay, well, when do we play each other and whatnot? Because it was just not the district for them and whatnot. But this one, though, is certainly a bit more preferable, you would think. Obviously Grapevine is still going to be probably the prohibitive district favorite, but outside of that, I think Creekview's got a very justified claim to be at number 2.
But if you're going to put 2 Carrollton schools with all the Dallas ISD schools in Division 1, why don't you just put Creekview with all the Dallas ISD schools
because
in
that makes too much sense.
No. Hate it when that happens.
It is some sort of just mad science that the UIL is working on as far as how they concoct these districts. And I also think it's it works in Creekview's favor because they play a very, very unique style of football. It's tough if you've never gone up against it with that flex spawn offense that they love to run, and they'll go entire games without so much as passing the ball. And if you've never schemed against that, it can be fairly overwhelming at first. I think that should at least help pave some pretty immediate success for them in this new district. Let's see, what else did I have down here? I also wanted to talk about just in the non-football sports. Bryan, one of the rumors that you had heard through the rumor mill and whatnot was perhaps maybe we might get a split for Frisco ISD. They had been in this 10-team district for these last couple of years, and all these abbreviated preseasons and whatnot. And I was, it was something that perhaps if you have your say over there at Frisco ISD, maybe you prefer, maybe chop off, 2-3 teams from that and give you a more traditional look to the district. Nevertheless, though, they will have to soldier through that once again, another 2 years of 10 teams in the district. So, what was your reaction to that, given that there was maybe at least a slight possibility of them being broken apart?
I saw that, and I wasn't surprised at all, but I'd be lying if there wasn't a part of me that was kind of hoping it would kind of get split up. I wanted things to get a little interesting, and I have not spoken to a coach that loves the 10-team district.
Yeah, why would you?
You want to. Obviously, Frisco ISD being together is awesome. The travel is great. You're traveling 4 miles at most for a game from the furthest Frisco school.
You're guaranteed 4 teams in the playoffs from your school district every year.
You're also, you're going to have a 5th, 6th, or even 7th place team, not make the playoffs. In a lot of other districts, you're a playoff team, and with 10 teams fighting for 4 spots, that's always, the odds aren't in your favor. You're playing 18 district games. You're starting district play, 2 weeks before any other district. It's a killing for me. It's a beating for me because you're not seeing these critical district matches with other sports and stuff going on. But yeah, I wasn't surprised, and that was one of the things I really wanted to look on. The first thing I saw was I wanted to see where Little Elm went. Mm-hmm. That was what I was most excited for. And then obviously I wanted to see the football districts. And then I was like, okay, what are they going to do with the non-football teams in Frisco? And, that was just the easy choice, really. And it makes sense. It may not be favorable for coaches and stuff, but it makes the most sense if you look at it. Because how would they split it up? Would they, take out some and then throw in like a McKinney North or the Colony in one? And I don't know how they would, divvy that up if you're going to split, Frisco from east to west or north to south or whatever and split it 4, 5, 6 ways. or 4 on one side, 6 on one other, 5 on, it would just get too complicated.
I could see a scenario where you look at the district right below them in District 10-5A with Denison, the Colony, Lovejoy, McKinney North, Princeton, Prosper, Rock Hill, Sherman, Wiley East. I mean, that's an 8-team district right there. So if you just simply took that and kind of basically built 2 9-team districts out of between that and Frisco ISD. I mean, again, it's just 9 versus 10, so it's not like again you get this extra this massive reprieve and a little bit more preseason time and whatnot. But it is at least an alternative. But I mean, yeah, because fortunately, though, this will be the last realignment cycle that they have to worry about this because guess what? Another high school's on the way over in Frisco ISD. So, they're not going to build an 11-team district. So yes, this will, fortunately, by this time, 2 years from now, we should see a split, though, between Frisco ISD. But, yeah, I'm kind of in line with you, Brian. I was hoping that they would split them up, too, just because it just does stink when you have essentially like a week of preseason play. And then, I mean, you're supposed to, districts, districts are where it counts. That's where the games you play there, those are the ones that matter relative to getting a playoff spot, and it just stinks to go through the first 2-3 weeks of your district schedule still kind of figuring out your rotations and lineups and what players can do what. I mean, that's what the preseason's for, but Frisco ISD is up against it because of how big it is that they get basically a quarter the length of preseason as everybody else. Let's see. Over at the 4A level, we can talk a little bit of 4A before we get out of here. As far as things with Argyle, Celina, and Sunnyvale, let's talk about the 4A Division II couple with Celina and Sunnyvale. Celina making the drop down to 4A Division II, and they got a tiny little district over in 4A D2. Just 5 schools: them, Aubrey, Crum, Sanger, and Van Alstyne. So they're going to have a massive non-district schedule.
Yeah, there's only 20 teams in Region 1.
So, Brian, what was your initial reaction to seeing Celina's new stomping grounds?
It's a lot easier than having to play Argyle and Melissa and Paris and all those, those powerhouses in District 1. Yeah, they're used to playing teams like Aubrey and Sanger in the non-football sports. Mm-hmm. But, man, that should be a cakewalk for Celina. There's no reason they shouldn't, run the table. Just at first glance, maybe Aubrey could give them some competition, but, given Celina's tradition, this should be a walk in the park, especially compared to having to play Argyle and Melissa and those guys.
It is going to stink having, though, half your schedule be non-district games. You just wonder just how that program's going to feel come week 5, and Coach Elliott and them are just okay, we're kind of ready. We know what we have here. We're just kind of ready for district play to begin.
Actually, you wonder who they're going to find to play in week 5 because there's not very many 5-team districts.
Well, there's 4 5-team districts in Region 1, so then you go over to. Where's Sunnyvale at? Sunnyvale and they're in Region 2.
Yeah. They got a 6-8.
We got
6-team district. Yeah. So, Devin. So what was then? Yeah, we mentioned Sunnyvale. So they've got a bit of a new look to their district. What was your reaction to 6-4A Division 2?
Pretty predictable. Yeah. I mean, you got Sunnyvale, Caddo Mills, Farmersville, Nevada Community, Cullen and Ford, Wills Point are your 6 teams. Sunnyvale, Farmersville, Caddo Mills, and Nevada Community had been in the same district these past 2 years. Yeah. Cullen and Ford dropped down. From Division 1, they've shared a district with Sunnyvale before in other sports, so that made sense. And then Wills Point, just geographically, riding out the 6. Sunnyvale's kind of been the big dog in this district for several years with a lot of these same teams. So I think from a football standpoint, going forward, I think they really got to like what they see in terms of how it's laid out. They know a lot of these teams really well, and. Yeah, like I say, it's in terms of Class 4A. It's usually 2-3 rounds down the road where you really find out what kind of team you have. And
then with Argyle, they remain in 4A Division 1. They are in District 7-4A. Alongside Anna, Carrollton, Ranchview, Kaufman, Melissa, Paris, and Terrell. They get 2 schools in Kaufman and Terrell that drop down to 4A. They were just you talk about district with glass ceiling. I mean, they took their lumps and it was a loaded 8-5A district alongside your Ennis's, your Corsicanas, Forney ISD and whatnot. They took some struggles there and whatnot, but now they will drop down to schools that are a bit more their size. They get a Ranchview team that won 9 games last season, and then they get to continue their rivalries with Melissa and Paris. So that's good. I mean, the the Argyle-Melissa games, especially with the strides that Melissa's made over the years, those games can certainly, I guess, bring out the best in the Eagles. So it's nice to see that they're going to at least keep that rivalry intact. Getting out of that region, especially in football, is going to be a bore, too, because you look over at District 5 4A, Division 1, and you talk about just a heavyweight district with Brownwood, Midlothian Heritage, Stephenville, Waco La Vega. I mean, that is, goodness, that is just littered with teams that could be contending for state championships at the 4A level. So as far as Argyle's immediate district, though, I mean, probably nothing that's going to ultimately topple them from getting a district title and whatnot. But as they advance in the playoffs, we'll see if what kind of teams emerge from that other district that they'll have to play probably in the second or third round and whatnot. But Region 2 is that is where the strength is very much in Class 4A Division 1. One
thing that sticks out in non-football sports in 4A, Celina won't have to play the Dallas schools in the first round in basketball. The Dallas schools, the Carters, the Lincolns, the Pinkstons, they're in District 12 4A. Celina, they stay with the same district. They throw Van Alstyne in there, but it's the same guys, Sanger, Melissa, Aubrey, Anna, and Gainesville. They're in District 9 4A. So they're playing, by-district games will be against, Fort Worth Harmony School of Nature and Athletics. Have y'all heard of that? I'm not a traditional basketball powerhouse, I'm sure. Uplift, North Hills Prep, Uplift, Summit International Prep. Yeah, so those aren't the top 5 teams in 4A.
Sunnyvale had the Uplift schools for a few years back, and that was, your kind of 81-11 type games.
What even are those schools? Do y'all have, I've never even heard of them.
No.
We'll see Celina playing maybe in the first round.
So, so no more of Celina winning a district championship and then drawing a fourth-place team that's ranked top 10 in the state from Dallas ISD. That's got to be a nice sigh of relief for Celina looking ahead. Let's see. That is, I don't know, guys, that is all that I think we've got here. I think we've touched on just about everybody. That is realignment, folks. Again, yes, one of the cornerstone moments on the high school sports calendar. We were all jazzed up for it Monday, Bryan. I'm sure you had a blast out there and in Birdville, just getting caught up in just that sea of high school football coaches as everybody, learned what these next 2 years are going to look like in high school athletics. And yes, that'll conclude this episode of the Star Local Media High School Sports Podcast. Once again, obviously a huge thanks to Kelly's Craft Tavern here in Frisco for having us out to record this episode. As we mentioned, folks, yes, everything from the full-service bar with many craft beers to the made-from-scratch food, the Tex-Mex menu, the ribs, the cheeseburgers. I mean, they have got it all. This is Kelly's Craft Tavern out here in Frisco, located at Preston Ridge on the west side of Preston Road, just north of 121. Take a swing by. We can attest. It's some good stuff. But yes, that'll do it for this episode of the Star Local Media High School Sports Podcast, folks. We'll be back on Monday to dip our toes back into high school basketball, as we've now put signing day to rest, put realignment to rest, and we can finally get back on track covering the actual high school sports that are in season, folks. You enjoy the rest of your week, and we will talk to y'all later.